If you pull the Chicago Police Department reports for the Englewood neighborhood from the late 90s, you are not reading a standard city census. You are reading a terrifying battlefield casualty list. The sheer volume of violent incidents documented in those official files made it a statistical anomaly for any young man to simply survive, let alone become a multi-million-dollar global icon. Yet, right in the center of this absolute chaos, a highly secretive protective operation was quietly taking place. According to the official league biographical records, Derrick Rose was born into this exact environment in 1988. But he wasn't just raised like a normal kid. He was heavily guarded like a priceless, high-value asset. His three older brothers formed a ruthless, unofficial security detail, fiercely shielding the boy from the dangerous local street factions that swallowed so many others. In the journalistic scouting reports of that era, observers noted that absolutely no one, not even the most persistent national recruiters, could get close to the phenomenal point guard without facing his brothers first. Why was this protective ring so intensely aggressive? Because the family knew his explosive, logic-defying athletic talent was their only golden ticket out of the darkness. They meticulously filtered every single handshake, every phone call, and every whisper in those poorly lit gyms. But this total isolation had a very dark side. To finally escape those unforgiving streets and enter the elite basketball scene, the family was forced to orchestrate a highly complex and shadowy deal in 2007. And the chilling details of that exact agreement, hidden deep within later sports media investigations, would eventually surface to threaten the very foundation of the empire they had so carefully built. Transitioning to Simeon Career Academy, Derrick Rose made a decision that immediately put a massive target on his back. He chose to wear jersey number 25. For anyone outside of Chicago, that is just a random number. But in the local high school basketball archives, that jersey prominently belonged to Ben Wilson, a highly talented local hero whose life was cut tragically short before he could reach the professional league. Wearing that specific number was a heavy, unspoken burden, a silent promise to finish what Wilson could not. The pressure from the local press was absolutely suffocating. Newspapers boldly labeled Derrick Rose as the new savior of Chicago basketball. How does a quiet teenager handle the crushing weight of an entire city's expectations? He completely destroys the competition. According to the official archives of the Illinois High School League, he led Simeon to consecutive back-to-back state championships in the years 2006 and 2007. His dominance was absolute, leaving opposing coaches completely baffled and searching for answers. If we examine the publications from the Chicago Tribune during that exact period, they recorded an astonishing statistic. His high school career ended with 120 wins and merely 12 losses. This staggering win rate begs a serious question. Was the local competition really that weak, or was he simply operating on a completely different evolutionary level? In the scouting reports from those tournament weekends, evaluators noted that his explosive crossover and court vision made grown men look like amateurs. He was flying high, completely untouchable on the hardwood, preparing to take his next big step toward ultimate stardom. Everything looked flawless on the glossy surface. But right when it seemed the path to the elite ranks was perfectly cleared, in the spring of 2007, a highly suspicious academic document surfaced behind closed doors, threatening to demolish his entire future before it even truly began. Out of all the prestigious colleges aggressively begging for his attention, Derrick Rose chose the University of Memphis. It was a heavily calculated move, aligning himself with head coach John Calipari, a man famous for giving his point guards total creative freedom. The chemistry was instantaneous, and the resulting gameplay was terrifying for the rest of the college basketball landscape. According to the official statistics provided by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the team achieved an unbelievable 38 wins during the 2007 to 2008 season, setting a massive league record at the time. It was a season of sheer athletic dominance, highlighted by high-flying acrobatic dunks and vicious fast breaks. But why did this particular team look so incredibly unstoppable? Because the entire offensive system was meticulously engineered around a freshman who played like a 10-year veteran. When the postseason tournament arrived, the national pressure reached a boiling point. Yet Derrick Rose thrived brilliantly under the bright lights. Based on the sports media data from that spectacular run, he averaged a remarkable 18 points per game in the playoffs, carrying his team all the way to the national championship final. In the broadcast transcripts from that highly anticipated final match, commentators noted that his raw speed was completely breaking every defensive scheme thrown at him. It was a heartbreaking loss in overtime, but his phenomenal performance cemented his status as a legendary prospect. He immediately declared his intention to turn professional, leaving the amateur ranks behind. The campus celebrated him as a true hero who brought them unparalleled glory. However, that glorious triumph turned to ash incredibly fast. In May of 2008, a printed copy of a standardized academic test landed on the desk of the league commission, revealing handwriting that clearly did not belong to Derrick Rose. The ink on his decision to turn professional was barely dry when the first massive crack in his perfectly crafted image appeared. The National Collegiate Athletic Association launched a ruthless investigation into the academic credentials of the young star. The accusation was explosive. Someone else had allegedly taken the standardized college admissions test in his place. According to the official investigation materials obtained by investigative journalists, a formal letter from the Educational Testing Service in 2008 completely invalidated his academic score. The implications were catastrophic for the university. The commission ruled to officially vacate all 38 wins from that record-breaking season, erasing his college legacy from the history books as if it never existed. But how did a scandal of this magnitude not completely derail his path to the professional league? In the reports surrounding the case, legal experts noted that a small army of high-priced lawyers aggressively stepped in, meticulously shielding the athlete from facing any direct suspension or severe personal penalties. The strategy was clear: protect the number one prospect at all costs. The university took the devastating blow, stripped of its banners and public pride, while the player himself walked away virtually unscathed. This was the dark side of sports business, where exceptional talent often bought a heavily guarded exit strategy. The academic scandal remained a permanent stain, a quiet whisper in the background of his rising fame. But while the university administration was frantically trying to wash away the shame of those erased records, the executives at the professional league headquarters were preparing for an entirely different kind of dramatic event. In June of 2008, a sealed envelope at the draft lottery held a shocking twist, defying a microscopic 1.7% mathematical probability that would change Chicago forever. The professional basketball draft lottery is usually a predictable game of mathematics, rewarding the absolute worst teams with the most coveted young talent. The Chicago Bulls had barely missed the playoffs, meaning their odds of securing the highly prized first overall pick were statistically laughable. According to the official league probability protocols from 2008, the franchise had exactly a 1.7% chance of winning the ultimate prize. It was practically impossible. Yet the ping-pong balls bounced in a way that defied all logic, sending shockwaves through the basketball world. The dramatic reveal set the stage for an intense debate. Would the team select Derrick Rose, the hometown hero with the recent academic cloud hanging over his head, or the seemingly safer, highly productive forward, Michael Beasley? On June 26, 2008, the tension inside the draft auditorium was thick enough to cut with a knife. Based on the official transcripts of the league events, when the commissioner stepped up to the podium and announced the name of the explosive point guard from Englewood, the city of Chicago erupted in absolute euphoria. The prodigal son was officially coming home to resurrect a franchise that had been searching for a savior since the golden era of the 90s. He put on that iconic red hat, instantly becoming the face of a multi-billion-dollar organization at just 19 years old. But this fairy tale homecoming was not going to be a smooth ride. Stepping into a professional locker room is a brutal reality check, especially when you are instantly handed the keys to the entire offense. He secured his future by signing his very first professional contract, netting him approximately $5 million per year, according to the publicized rookie wage scales. However, as he walked into the training facility with that massive paycheck, he had no idea about the intense resentment and quiet resistance he was about to face from the seasoned veterans who were not ready to bow down to a quiet teenager. Transitioning from the college level to the grueling 82-game professional schedule completely shatters most rookies. But Derrick Rose was built entirely different. From the very first tip-off, his breathtaking speed and violent crossovers began breaking the ankles of established veteran defenders. He was not just playing, he was making a highly aggressive statement every single night. According to the official press releases from the league offices, his spectacular debut campaign easily earned him the prestigious Rookie of the Year award for the 2008 to 2009 season. He was the undisputed beacon of hope for Chicago, but the true test of a superstar happens when the regular season ends and the brutal playoff intensity begins. The schedule pitted the young Bulls against the defending champions, the heavily favored Boston Celtics, in what was expected to be a quick, merciless execution. Instead, the rookie completely flipped the script. Based on the official game logs from April 18, 2009, in his very first postseason appearance, he absolutely dismantled the legendary Boston defense by scoring 36 points and dishing out 11 assists. In the broadcast commentary of that iconic game, analysts were audibly gasping, noting that a first-year player dominating a championship roster with such fearless aggression was something rarely seen in the modern era of the sport. He attacked the rim with a reckless abandon that terrified opposing coaches and captivated millions of fans. That legendary playoff series went to 7 grueling games, establishing him as a legitimate superstar who feared absolutely no one. The league was officially put on notice, and the young guard spent the next summer quietly sharpening his lethal arsenal. But the real earthquake hit not on the hardwood, but in a quiet media room. In September of 2010, during a standard routine press conference, he leaned into the microphone and uttered a specific phrase that initially made reporters chuckle, but soon made the entire basketball world tremble in fear. The air in the media room was thick with typical preseason optimism, but what Derrick Rose said next completely shifted the balance of power in the professional basketball world. According to the official video archives of the Chicago Bulls press conferences from September of 2010, a reporter casually asked the young point guard about his personal expectations for the upcoming year. Instead of delivering a standard, safely trained media cliché, he looked dead into the cameras and calmly asked, "Why can't I be the most valuable player of the league?" The journalists initially smiled, assuming it was just youthful arrogance speaking. But why was he suddenly so aggressively confident in his abilities? The answer walked through the doors of the practice facility that exact same summer in the form of a brilliant, defensively minded head coach named Tom Thibodeau. In the investigative reports detailing the team's internal dynamics, insiders noted that Thibodeau immediately handed Derrick Rose the absolute, unquestioned keys to the entire offensive system, demanding ruthless execution on every single possession. The strategy was brutally simple: suffocate opponents on defense and let the explosive guard run wild in transition. The results were absolutely terrifying for the rest of the league. Based on the official league tables for the 2010 to 2011 season, the team secured a staggering 62 wins, claiming the best record in the entire sport. Derrick Rose was suddenly an unstoppable force of nature, executing violent acrobatic dunks over towering defenders that made the local crowds roar and team physical therapists hold their breath in sheer terror. Was this reckless, high-flying style of play secretly placing an invisible, ticking time bomb inside his knees? The breathtaking highlights masked a dangerous reality of extreme physical wear and tear. But before anyone could seriously question the long-term medical consequences of his explosive dominance, the League Commission finalized the media ballots in May of 2011, delivering a historic verdict that completely shattered the meticulously laid championship plans of LeBron James. When the official announcement finally broke, it sent massive shockwaves from the Windy City all the way to the sunny beaches of Miami. Derrick Rose had achieved the impossible, officially dethroning the established kings of the sport in a stunning upset. According to the historical reference guides of the league, he captured the ultimate individual crown at the astonishing age of 22 years and 6 months, permanently etching his name in the record books as the youngest, most valuable player in history. But just how dominant was this victory behind closed doors? If we dig into the published results of the League Commission, the voting breakdown reveals a staggering reality. He secured exactly 113 first-place votes out of a possible 120. This was not a narrow victory. It was an absolute, undeniable landslide that completely humiliated seasoned superstars like LeBron James and Dwight Howard. How could a quiet kid from Englewood, who just a few years prior was dodging dangerous street factions, command such absolute authority over the entire sports media landscape? During his deeply emotional acceptance speech, tears streamed down his face as he publicly thanked his mother for keeping him away from the dark side of fame. It was a beautiful, picture-perfect moment of triumph that captivated millions of television viewers. However, the deafening success of the regular season quickly slammed into a brutal brick wall. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Miami Heat deployed a suffocating, hyper-aggressive defensive scheme that completely isolated and neutralized the young superstar, exposing the glaring offensive flaws of the Chicago roster. This painful defeat was the first loud alarm bell ringing in the background of a supposedly perfect, unstoppable dynasty. Yet, the franchise executives chose to completely ignore the warning signs of his incredibly heavy physical and mental burden. Instead of finding him help, the league officials were so mesmerized by his global financial appeal that in December of 2011, they fundamentally rewrote their collective bargaining agreement, creating a massively lucrative legal document that would forever bear his name. The sudden rise of Derrick Rose was no longer just a great athletic story. It had officially morphed into a colossal, billion-dollar financial empire that everyone wanted a piece of. In the boardrooms of the league, executives scrambled to ensure their golden goose remained securely locked inside his golden cage. According to the financial reports of the professional basketball clubs, in December of 2011, he signed a historic contract extension worth an astronomical $94.8 million. The league literally had to invent a brand new financial loophole, appropriately dubbed the Derrick Rose Rule, just to legally pay him this massive sum of money at such a young age. But the team's salary was merely pocket change compared to what was secretly happening in the shadowy world of athletic endorsements. In the leaked corporate documents obtained by financial journalists of the time, the details of his brand new shoe deal were absolutely staggering. A major corporate giant, Adidas, reportedly locked him into a massive 14-year agreement valued at an unbelievable $185 million. And right here, a deeply troubling question emerges. How much invisible, psychological weight does a young man carry when hundreds of millions of corporate dollars are directly tied to his fragile joints? He was the undisputed face of the league, heavily featured in aggressive marketing campaigns globally, completely overshadowing his veteran peers. The jersey sales were breaking international records, and he was living a life most could only dream of. Yet, the relentless pressure to perform every single night to justify those enormous paychecks to the board members pushed his body to the absolute physical brink. He was universally beloved, incredibly wealthy, and seemingly invincible, enjoying the absolute peak of a legendary career. He had everything a man could possibly desire right up until the cursed afternoon of April 28, 2012, a devastating date that permanently split the history of Chicago into a glorious before and a tragic, agonizing after. It was a beautiful spring afternoon in Chicago, and the energy inside the United Center was absolutely electric. The first game of the playoffs against the Philadelphia 76ers was winding down, and the Bulls were comfortably leading by 12 points. The victory was practically guaranteed. But then, a single coaching decision triggered a sequence of events that would haunt the city for decades. Why was the reigning most valuable player still on the floor with the outcome already decided? According to the official medical reports and the high-definition game footage from that afternoon on April 28, 2012, the unthinkable happened. Derrick Rose drove into the paint, gathered his weight for a signature explosive jump, and suddenly his left knee buckled in a way that looked completely unnatural. Based on the official game clock statistics, there were exactly 1 minute and 20 seconds remaining in the match when he collapsed to the hardwood, clutching his leg in pure agony. The arena went deathly silent as thousands of fans watched their hero being helped to the locker room, unable to put any weight on his foot. The subsequent magnetic resonance imaging confirmed every fan's worst nightmare, a complete tear of the anterior cruciate ligament. In the investigative articles published by major sports outlets following the incident, many questioned the heavy minutes he had played throughout the season under the relentless system of the head coach. Was his body already screaming for a break before the final snap? The surgeons promised a full recovery within 12 months, assuring the public that modern medicine could reconstruct a superstar. But as the long months of rehabilitation dragged on into the spring of 2013, a secret diagnosis appeared in his medical files that would soon ignite a firestorm of public fury. For an entire year, the city of Chicago lived in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the return of the king. The corporate giants at Adidas launched a massive, multi-million-dollar advertising campaign titled The Return, meticulously documenting every step of his grueling physical therapy. But as the months passed, a strange and deeply unsettling tension began to grow between the player and the organization. According to the official statements from the Chicago Bulls medical staff, by February and March of 2013, the doctors had formally cleared the athlete for full-contact basketball. Physically, the reconstructed knee was supposedly stronger than ever. Yet the superstar refused to step back onto the court. Why would a competitive warrior choose to sit on the sidelines while his teammates were battling in the playoffs? Based on the official player statistics for the 2012 to 2013 season, Derrick Rose played exactly 0 games despite being seen dunking effortlessly during pregame warm-ups. This prolonged absence created a massive rift with the fan base, who began to view him not as a victim of a tragic injury, but as a wealthy holdout who had lost his nerve. In the investigative reports from local sports journalists, it was noted that the psychological trauma of the injury was far deeper than the physical tear. Rumors swirled about his inner circle, exerting too much influence, advising him to protect his long-term health and corporate contracts over his loyalty to the team. The image of the humble hero was rapidly dissolving into that of a detached celebrity. He eventually returned to the lineup in the fall of 2013, determined to silence the doubters and reclaim his throne. However, the comeback lasted for a heartbeat because in the 10th game of the new season, fate delivered a second, even more specialized blow to his other knee. The world wanted to believe that the old Derrick Rose was back, but the early games of the 2013 to 2014 season told a different, much more concerning story. he looked hesitant, his legendary speed seemingly dampened by a layer of invisible caution. Then came the fateful night in the Pacific Northwest. According to the formal injury reports released by the League Press Service on November 22, 2013, during a road game against the Portland Trail Blazers, the superstar felt a sharp, sickening pop in his right knee. It wasn't the reconstructed ligament this time, it was a torn medial meniscus. Based on the official league protocols and game logs, he had managed to participate in only 10 games before his body betrayed him once again. This second major surgery in less than 2 years felt like a definitive closing of his championship window. In the analytical columns of the major sports media, experts began to openly discuss the possibility that his explosive playing style was fundamentally incompatible with the human skeletal structure. The psychological isolation intensified as he retreated back into his private world of recovery and silence. While his peers were winning titles and signing new deals, he was becoming a tragic figure of what might have been. The public sympathy was quickly being replaced by a cold, professional skepticism. By the time he attempted yet another return, the team was moving in a different direction, and the city's patience had finally run out. But while the sports world was ready to write his professional obituary, an entirely different kind of storm was brewing in the legal system. In August of 2015, a massive civil lawsuit was filed in a California court containing explosive allegations that threatened to strip away his freedom and his remaining reputation. Just as the sports world was debating whether his knees would ever hold up for another full season, a far more dangerous threat emerged from the shadows of his private life. This was no longer a question of athletic performance. It was a battle for his very freedom and what remained of his public dignity. In August of 2015, a massive legal bomb was detonated in a California courtroom. According to the official civil documents filed in Los Angeles, an anonymous former girlfriend brought forward a series of extremely serious accusations involving a scandalous incident that allegedly took place back in 2013. The details that leaked into the press were absolutely jarring, painting a picture of a superstar whose life away from the cameras was spiraling out of control. Based on the formal court filings, the plaintiff was seeking a staggering $21.5 million in damages. Why did this story surface 2 full years after the alleged events? The timing felt like a calculated move to many observers, while others saw it as a long overdue pursuit of justice. In the investigative reports from major legal analysts, it was noted that the representatives for the athlete were bracing for a high-stakes trial that could potentially end his corporate endorsements overnight. The clean, humble image of the kid from Englewood was being replaced by a dark, controversial narrative that dominated every headline. While the lawyers were filing their motions, the league and the corporate giants at Adidas were quietly watching, weighing the risks of staying associated with a man facing such heavy public scrutiny. The pressure was mounting from every direction, and the Golden Boy of Chicago was officially on the defensive. But before he could even step into a courtroom to defend his name, a brutal physical collision during a routine practice session left him with a face that was literally shattered. The autumn of 2015 was perhaps the darkest period in the life of the youngest, most valuable player in history. He was fighting a war on 2 fronts, one in the legal system and another with his own fragile body. On September 29, 2015, during the very first practice session of the training camp, disaster struck again. According to the official medical bulletins from the team, he took a stray elbow to the face that resulted in a fractured left orbital bone. Based on the surgical reports, the injury required immediate corrective operation, forcing him to play the beginning of the season in a protective plastic mask. He looked like a phantom on the court, his vision blurred and his confidence visibly shaken. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological weight of the ongoing civil trial in Los Angeles. Throughout October of 2016, as the new season was approaching, he was forced to shuttle back and forth between the basketball court and the federal courthouse. In the official transcripts of the trial proceedings, the world watched as every intimate detail of his private life was picked apart by aggressive attorneys. The tension reached a breaking point on October 19, 2016. According to the finalized court records, a jury of 8 men and women returned a unanimous verdict, finding the athlete not liable for the claims and clearing him of all financial responsibility. He walked out of that courtroom a free man, but the damage to his public persona was profound. The city of Chicago, which once worshipped him, had grown weary of the constant drama and the endless string of injuries. The front office had seen enough. On June 22, 2016, in a move that felt like a cold-blooded betrayal to his most loyal fans, the team executives finalized a document that officially ended his tenure in his hometown. The phone call that changed everything came during the filming of a documentary about his life, capturing a moment of raw, unshielded emotion that few superstars ever show. On June 22, 2016, the Chicago Bulls officially traded their hometown hero to the New York Knicks. According to the publicized transaction logs of the league, the trade was a massive multiplayer deal that signaled the complete dismantling of the era he had built. In the documentary footage titled Pooh, fans saw the exact second he received the news from his agent. He broke down in tears, completely overwhelmed by the reality that he was being discarded by the city he had tried so hard to save. Why did the organization give up on him just as his legal troubles were ending? The official narrative from the front office suggested they needed a fresh start, but the subtext was clear. They no longer believed his body could withstand the rigors of a championship chase. He arrived in New York to a media circus, trying to put on a brave face for the cameras. In his very first press conference at Madison Square Garden, he made a bold and highly criticized statement, calling the Knicks a super team. Based on the reports from New York sports media, many saw this as a desperate attempt to regain his lost swagger. He was now playing in the world's most famous arena under the brightest lights imaginable, but he was a different man. He was no longer the explosive force that could jump over 7-footers. He was a veteran trying to find his place in a system that didn't quite fit him. He played through the pain, trying to prove he still belonged in the elite tier of the sport. However, the internal chaos of the New York organization was about to collide with his own personal instability. On January 9, 2017, just an hour before a scheduled home game, the superstar did something that would leave the entire city in a state of absolute shock and confusion. Imagine the confusion inside the Madison Square Garden locker room when the starting lineup is being announced, and your star player is nowhere to be found. On January 9, 2017, the New York Knicks were preparing for a home game against the New Orleans Pelicans. But as the clock ticked closer to tip-off, the coaching staff realized something was terribly wrong. Derrick Rose had not arrived at the arena, he hadn't called, and he wasn't answering his phone. According to the immediate reports from major New York sports media outlets that evening, the organization was in a state of absolute panic, with some officials even checking local hospitals. Why would a professional athlete earning millions of dollars simply vanish without a single word to his employers? Based on the leaked internal memos and subsequent news reports, the head coach and his teammates were left completely in the dark as the game started without him. It was an unprecedented breach of professional conduct that sent the tabloid press into a frenzy of dark speculation. Rumors of a sudden mental breakdown or a secret conflict with the front office began to swirl through the city. The mystery only deepened when he finally resurfaced the next morning at the training facility. According to the publicized disciplinary records of the club, he was hit with a massive fine, estimated to be around $200,000 for his unexcused absence. His explanation was brief and vague, citing an urgent family matter in Chicago that required his immediate physical presence. But many insiders questioned the logic. Why not just send a single text message? In the investigative columns following the incident, journalists noted that this was the clearest sign yet that the former most valuable player was emotionally detached from the sport. He was a man playing a game while his heart was clearly somewhere else. He finished the season in New York, but the bridge had been burned. By the time the summer of 2017 arrived, his market value had plummeted so far that he was forced to accept a humiliating financial reality that few could have predicted just 5 years earlier. Falling from a $94 million contract to a league minimum deal is a psychological blow that can break even the strongest individuals. In July 2017, the once mighty Derrick Rose signed a one-year agreement with the Cleveland Cavaliers for a mere $2.1 million. According to the official salary cap data of the league, he was now making less than some bench players who had never even seen an All-Star game. He joined forces with LeBron James, hoping that playing for a championship contender would revitalize his fading career. But the basketball gods had other plans. Early in the season, a severe ankle injury sidelined him once again, and this time, the physical pain seemed to trigger a total existential crisis. Based on the reports from the Cleveland Cavaliers press office, in November 2017, the superstar took an indefinite leave of absence from the team, physically removing himself from the environment to contemplate his future in the sport. The whispers in the media grew louder. Was this the end? Investigative sports journalists reported that he was seriously considering a permanent departure from the professional ranks, exhausted by the endless cycle of surgery and rehabilitation. He spent nearly 2 weeks in total isolation, weighing the heavy corporate expectations of his Adidas contract against his own mental well-being. How much more could one body take before it simply refused to cooperate? He eventually decided to return to the team, but the organization had already moved on. In February 2018, he was traded to the Utah Jazz and then immediately discarded, placed on the waivers list as if he were an unwanted piece of equipment. He was officially a man without a team, a former king wandering the wilderness. But just as the world prepared to write his final professional obituary, a familiar voice from his past reached out with a lifeline. In March 2018, he signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves, setting the stage for a night of pure, unadulterated magic that would remind everyone why they fell in love with him in the first place. Every legend deserves one final moment of absolute glory, a flash of the old brilliance before the light fades forever. For Derrick Rose, that moment arrived on the spookiest night of the year. On October 31st, 2018, the Minnesota Timberwolves faced off against the Utah Jazz, the very team that had disrespected him by cutting him just months prior. With several starters out due to injury, the veteran was thrust into the starting lineup. What followed was a performance that felt like it was scripted in a Hollywood studio. According to the official game logs and statistical archives from that Halloween night, Derrick Rose turned back the clock, slicing through the defense with a ferocity the world hadn't seen since 2011. He wasn't just playing, he was exorcising every demon that had haunted him for the past 6 years. Based on the finalized box score, he finished the game with a career-high 50 points, including a game-winning block on the final shot. In the post-game broadcast footage, the image of him standing on the court with tears streaming down his face became an instant viral sensation. Why did this single regular season game resonate so deeply with millions of people? Because it was the ultimate proof of human resilience. In the emotional interview conducted right on the hardwood, he could barely speak, simply repeating how hard he had worked to get back to that level of performance. It was a rare moment of genuine, raw vulnerability in a world of manufactured sports personas. The fact anchors of that night were undeniable. 50 points, 6 assists, and a standing ovation from a crowd that realized they were witnessing a miracle. This spectacular outburst didn't just save his career, it transformed his entire public image. He was no longer the tragic what-if story or the broken superstar. He was the ultimate survivor. This newfound momentum earned him a lucrative new 2-year contract in July 2019, taking his talents to the city of Detroit, where he would embrace a brand new, highly specialized role that would extend his journey in the league for several more seasons. The emotional high of that 50-point night in Minnesota eventually gave way to a cold, hard business reality. Derrick Rose was no longer the centerpiece of a franchise, but he had something perhaps even more valuable, a hard-earned reputation as a resilient survivor. In July 2019, the veteran point guard made a calculated move that surprised many analysts, signing a 2-year deal with the Detroit Pistons. According to the official financial summaries of the league, the contract was valued at $15 million, a significant raise that proved the league still believed in his ability to contribute at a high level. But the player who showed up in the Motor City was not the same man who had taken the world by storm in 2011. He had undergone a profound physical and tactical transformation. Why did he stop the high-flying, rim-rattling dunks that made him a global icon? Because he had finally accepted the limitations of his own anatomy. He traded those reckless flights for a sophisticated, old-man game, relying on crafty floaters and mid-range jumpers that preserved his knees while still devastating opposing defenses. Based on the official statistical databases from the 2019 to 2020 season, he averaged over 18 points per game while coming almost exclusively off the bench. He had become the ultimate hired gun, a professional bench scorer who could ignite an offense in seconds. In the scouting reports from that period, rival coaches noted that his basketball intelligence had reached a peak level, allowing him to dominate without the raw, explosive speed of his youth. He was now a mentor to the younger generation, a quiet leader in a locker room full of prospects. But as the Pistons drifted toward a total organizational rebuild, a familiar voice from his past reached out once again. In February 2021, the phones in the Detroit front office rang with an offer that would send him back to the most famous arena on earth for one final act of redemption. The city of New York is known for being incredibly unforgiving to those who fail to meet its sky-high expectations, and the first tenure of Derrick Rose at Madison Square Garden had ended in mystery and frustration. Yet, in February 2021, the script was flipped in a way that few saw coming. According to the official transaction archives of the league, he was traded back to the New York Knicks, reuniting with his longtime mentor, Tom Thibodeau. This wasn't just a simple roster move, it was a psychological turning point for a franchise that had been wandering in the darkness for years. How does a man go from being an outcast in a city to being its most beloved savior? He does it by playing with a level of grit and selflessness that resonates with the blue-collar spirit of New York. Based on the formal voting records for the league's year-end awards, his impact was so profound that he finished in 3rd place for the 6th Man of the Year award in 2021, despite playing only half the season with the team. In the television broadcast transcripts from those playoff games, the sound of the crowd was deafening as thousands of New Yorkers who once criticized him now chanted MVP every time he touched the ball. He led the Knicks to their first playoff appearance in nearly a decade, providing the steady, veteran hand that the young roster desperately needed. However, the ghost of his past physical trauma was never far away. Another series of procedures on his ankles eventually forced him back into a reserve role, and then out of the active rotation entirely. In the investigative reports from the local sports media, it was noted that while his body was finally failing him, his influence in the locker room remained unshakable. He had become a living monument to perseverance. But as the Knicks prepared to move on to a younger core in the summer of 2023, He received one last call from a place that held the keys to his earliest, most innocent triumphs. Every great story eventually comes full circle, and for Derrick Rose, the final destination was the city where his legend first took flight on the national stage. In July 2023, he signed what would be his final professional contract, a 2-year agreement with the Memphis Grizzlies. According to the financial disclosures from the team's front office, the deal was worth approximately $6.5 million. He was returning to Memphis, the city where he had led the university to a national final 15 years earlier. But he wasn't there to be a star. He was there to be a guardian. The Grizzlies were dealing with a massive internal crisis involving their young superstar, Ja Morant, and the organization viewed Derrick Rose as the only man who could provide the necessary guidance. Based on the insider materials and interviews with team personnel, he embraced this role of the grizzled veteran, often seen speaking quietly in the ears of the younger players during timeouts. He was a man who had seen the highest peaks and the darkest valleys of the sport, and he was determined to share those lessons before the clock ran out. But as the season progressed, the accumulated damage to his body made it clear that the end was near. He struggled to stay on the floor, appearing in only a handful of games as minor injuries continued to pile up. On a quiet morning in September 2024, the news that the world had been expecting finally broke. According to a deeply personal statement released across his social media platforms, the youngest, most valuable player in history officially announced his retirement from the sport of basketball. The broken flower of Chicago had finally decided to step away from the glare of the lights. He hung up his jersey, ending a 16-year odyssey that had redefined the concept of an athletic career. He walked away with his head held high, but the financial documents left behind revealed a final, staggering secret about a contract signed over a decade ago that had silently turned him into one of the wealthiest men in the history of the game. As the bright lights of the arena finally dim, a massive and deeply divisive debate begins to simmer in the corridors of the basketball world. Does a man who touched the sun for only a few brief moments deserve a permanent seat among the immortals? According to the analytical reports from major sports portals and historical experts, Derrick Rose presents a unique and unprecedented dilemma. He is currently the only most valuable player in the modern history of the league, whose induction into the Hall of Fame is not considered a mathematical certainty. In the investigative articles examining his career trajectory, journalists have pointed out that while his peak was higher than almost anyone else, its duration was tragically short. Was he a superstar, or simply a shooting star that burned out before the world could truly appreciate its glow? But while the critics argue over his statistics, his bank account tells an entirely different story of ultimate victory. In the financial investigations conducted by top-tier business reporters, it was revealed that his legendary partnership with Adidas was built on a foundation of absolute loyalty. Even during the long years when he was physically unable to step onto the court, the corporate checks never stopped arriving. Based on the publicized financial summaries, his payments from that massive $250 million endorsement deal are scheduled to continue all the way through 2025, making him one of the most financially successful athletes to ever lace up a pair of sneakers. How did a kid from the most dangerous streets of Chicago manage to outmaneuver the most powerful corporate lawyers in the world? It was the ultimate long game. In the end, we are left with a figure who is both a tragic hero and a master of survival. He lost his explosive athleticism, his status as the #1 star, and his chance at multiple championships, but he never lost his dignity or his connection to the people. He remains the most beloved figure in the history of Chicago basketball after the era of Michael Jordan, a symbol of a city that knows exactly what it is like to get knocked down and have to crawl back up. As we look back on the incredible journey of Derrick Rose from 1988 to 2024, one final question remains. If you could have all the money and the fame, but had to pay for it with your own physical health and the heartbreak of an entire city, would you still take the deal? The answer might be hidden in the quiet smile he now wears away from the cameras, finally at peace with the ghost of the MVP he used to be.